record. As we get going here, hey everybody, my name is Nils Vinya. If you've been on before, maybe you've been in one of my groups, I'll be your moderator for this session where we'll be talking about the design of your success plan, one of the most important topics in CS. And you know, everybody has a different flavor of this. There is no one perfect, one size fits all. So it's gonna be really interesting to bring the ideas, the questions, the challenges, and the solutions that you all have experienced to the table. And that's the goal for today, purely that. There is no, wrong topic. There's no wrong answer to any of these things. It's purely just sharing your experience, asking the question. This is the forum to be able to ask the question to your other peers of how does this work? How do you do this? How do you implement this? How do you support this? How do you track it? How do you enforce it? How do you drive accountability to it? Right? That's the fun stuff that we're going to have. So in working with the large group that we have here, about 50 or so people, the most efficient way for me to call on you and to know that you have something you want to say or a question to ask or something to contribute is to click on the participants button in the bottom bar on the Zoom piece, and you will see a little raise hand icon or a raise hand button. And if you click on that raise button, do it now just to test. You can, well, I see your raised hands on the side, and so that's how I'm going to know who wants to get into the queue, because otherwise it's too hard to try to make sure I find everybody on the right screens. Okay, cool. So test is done. Everybody drop your hands. Where the topic, as I said, is the success plan, the design of your success plan. And before we dive into kind of the solutions of how you all have done this, or if you have, would love to start with just the questions that are on your mind when it comes to either building, enforcing, implementing, running with success plans. What is the single most important question that you have when it comes to the success plan inside of your organization? And I thought at first we could just kind of circle up on all of the questions that are there, because I guarantee there's a lot of overlapping questions, and then we can narrow it down and dig into some specific topics and hear about specific solutions that you all have put in place to address those questions. All right, so if you have a burning question, would love for you to click the participants thing, click the raise hand icon in there, and then I'll call on you and we'll get started here. All right, David Ellen, come off of mute, and please stay on mute if you are not already. Go ahead and mute yourself, and then when you come off of mute, when I call on you, can come off mute, talk, and then we'll go back on mute just to keep it all easy there. All right, David, come off of mute and tell us about what is the question that you have around success plans.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. So for me, the first question I would want to ask is, how are the different leaders in the organization and how is the company in general defining success? It's really hard to build a success plan if there are too many definitions of success in the room.
Good. And when you say leaders in the organization, are you talking about inside of your organization, or are you talking about inside your customer's organization?
Yes to both. I think yes, you start inside, you go outside, and then you marry the two, right?
Yep. Okay. So different definitions of success. How do we marry those and incorporate that into a success plan when, frankly, everybody might have a different view? Great point, David. Thank you. All right. Who else has a question? David, you can drop your hand off of on the piece. And we've got Brian. Brian Hartley, come off of mute and share with us.
Sure. Yeah. My question is around who should get a success plan? What are the thresholds that people look at to say you get a success plan versus you don't, or you don't get one officially?
Okay, who should get a success plan? Awesome, fantastic. I'm just making notes of each of these. Cool, thank you, Brian. Okay, you can drop your hand there. Who else has a question on the success plan? And if you don't have a question, I am going to call on random people because I know you have a question. You might not be 100% confident raising your hand. All right, RuPaul, share with us.
My question is, should success plans be built in conjunction with the customer that you're working with, or what's the best formula for it?
Awesome. So should the success plan be built in conjunction with your customer, as opposed to coming up with this on your own and kind of doing it from your company's point of view? Very cool. Thank you. Ben Stewart, how about you?
So what about, in addition to a success plan, when you have a client that begins to be what we call like at risk, how do you handle those situations and engage other teams? Is there a formal process you have internally that is separate and kind of escalated from your normal success plan kind of as a shoot off. So yeah, for at-risk situations.
Awesome. So success plans, what happens when things don't go quite according to plan, and you got to involve everybody else, escalations, integrations of other teams. Very cool. All right. Thank you, Ben. Ron, why don't you come off, Baumert, come off and share with us your question.
Hey guys. Hey, happy Thursday. It was kind of along the lines of Ben's question, but around operationalizing success plans. So, where there's gain side to tango, and that's kind of internally, but there's also the external. I mean, I think we've all used like Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints. How do you operationalize the external facing success plans?
Good. Thank you. That's fantastic. A juicy topic. I'm sure there are more than enough ideas to go around. Vipul, why don't you come off and just share with us your question?
Yeah, like I just wanted to ask, the leaders here, whether they have multiple success plans and how do they align their success plans with the customer? Like the vision of success in the customer's eye and the vision of success in your organization, are they completely aligned? And do you have multiple success plan that, okay, this would be the minimum requirement in terms of success?
Cool. Awesome, Vipul. So do you have multiple success plans? Do you just have one? How do you align the success plans and what is articulated in there with what the customer wants and ultimately needs? Very cool. Thank you. Joran Hoffman.
Yes, sir. We're going to implement our success plans, and my question would be, like, it's easy for the new clients. You can just run them through, but how would you do it for like the existing clients? How would you start? If they're long-term clients and they already gave you a lot of information, then they're not going to go walk through the question. So happy to hear some thoughts there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's an interesting point on pretty much everything we always do in CS, and we always evolve, right? We got the brand new people, which it's a piece of cake, but then you got this whole stash of people who've been around for a long time, and how are you going to integrate it into their world? Thank you, Joran. All right, so the name is a little bit, I think it's the first name and the last name, Matt Timmons.
That's the one, yes, I don't know what's going on there. Hi, yeah, my question's similar to, I think, a couple of others, but I'm interested in folks' views on how are people tailoring the success plan by segment, so by segment of customer, whether it's more medium touch versus higher touch, what are the differences in success plans in that regard?
Good. Okay, so how to tailor it by segment, medium touch, high touch, if there's even a low touch version, whatever that is. Cool. Thank you. Cool. All right. And we've got Ron, you can drop your hand. Okay, cool. So that was a good start. We covered, there's a lot of different questions out there, right? How are the leaders in your organization defining CS and sorry, not defining CS, defining success, right? Who gets a success plan, right? What should be built should it be built in conjunction with the customer? What do you do for clients who are at risk? How do you operationalize the success plan as you're rolling these out and, with systems and support? Or do you have multiple success plans to align with the customer, right? Maybe different business units or even different plans, for different segments. It's easy for new clients, but how do you do this for existing clients? Cool. So imagine there's a lot of overlap on these questions and a lot of people have these. So let's now start talking about some of the experiences you all have had with regards to attacking some of these. And if you would like to share an experience that touches on one of these questions or is something directly from your experience with success plans, good, bad, or ugly, this is what to do, this is what not to do, this worked for us, this didn't work for us, raise your hand on the right side and would love to dig in and hear your thoughts, and then we'll kind of bounce off from there. So Kevin, Leonor.
Hello, everyone. I work for Ring Central. We're 22 billion in market cap. And for those of you that have a lot of questions about success plans, just know that even a company of our size, we still haven't really grasped everything that we need for our success plans yet. So keep plugging away at it. You'll get to it. One of the things that we've started doing is we started developing an adoption team to be able to look for common ways that have been successful for each individual CSM and compiling that. So how we do our success plans right now is through each individual customer. And how we do that is through that first initial consultation. There was another question that Duran had regarding customers that have already been with us. And we also kind of leverage the idea that every single business that we work with usually has goals that change from quarter to quarter. So just because they've given us a lot of information in the past, we're still able to ask the same questions that we had in the past because goals change from quarter to quarter for each customer. So we're able to really try and find out what are the new things that are going on in their customer, in each customer segment, and tailor those customer success plans accordingly. What we do is that we take some of the features that we know are either quick wins. We usually do that for our new onboarding customers because they usually go through like an 8 to 12 week implementation process with RingCentral. And that usually means that they've been plugging away and not seeing any results until we start to incorporate some of those quick win features. So we want to make sure that they're getting a faster time to value cycle. And then we could start to work on the ones that are most important and top of mind for our customers as far as the reasons why they even bought the product in the first place.
Kevin,
yeah.
I got a quick question here. What is the actual asset that is the success plan for you? Is this a document? Is this something in a system? Mm-hmm. Is it a standard list of things? Like what is the physical nature of the success plan for you?
It is a document. So it's a shared document between us and the customer that we've mutually agreed upon that these are the metrics and these are the things that we want to focus on, and how we are able to even define success between both us and the customer. So after the first consultation, we as CSMs make our recommendation for the success plan, the steps that we need to be able to hit some of those desired outcomes that they're looking for. And then we have a mutual agreement on who owns pieces of those of that success plan. Okay. So we even assign roles within our organization as well as roles within their organization. So that way there's somebody that's responsible for end user feedback. There's somebody mm-hmm. that's responsible for the adoption portion of it, both internally and externally.
Cool. Kevin, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for the context inside of a $20+ billion market cap company. And like you said, you still don't have it all figured out perfectly. So good call. All right, cool. Tripti, your name is displayed appropriately this time. Thank you. Why don't you come off of mute and share with us either how you've addressed one of the questions we talked about earlier, or an element of your experience with success plans.
Definitely, right? So how I have been tackling success plans for my customers. I handle both enterprise and mid-market for Sprinkler right now. We usually begin by taking the entire year's strategy from the customer so that we understand what's going to be the end goal or the positive business outcome of the entire year's exercise that we are going to or about to do with them. This can apply to both existing and new customers as well. They can further be broken down into quarterly business outcomes that we can use as measures of the success for the customer side. And for internal success measurement of how well a customer is doing, these are all adoption plans that I build out. The adoption plans are broken down to different modules, can be by different products, so that we know exactly where the customer is lacking versus where we need to focus upon, and formulate strategies and work with customer to ensure that the adoption takes place. Good adoption usually can be said that the customer is happy. Meanwhile, there are problems that come in between, like we did discuss about the risk plan. One of the persons did ask a question about the risk plan. That is when there is a proper risk associated, which can be identified if you'll take a look at the low adoption And the customer happiness index score is something that I also collect, which also signifies that probably a customer is not happy when they're giving me a really, really low score of say a 5. And I always take next 3 steps that they will tell me that these are the 3 things if you can fix, or 5 things that you can fix or ensure that are achieved, then I'll be able to give you a score of 10. Right, so I'm rounding everything off. I start with the year strategy, break it down to quarterly strategy, do my value realization check-ins quarterly with the customer, and do an ongoing process of adoption with them.
Thank you, Tripti. And what is the physical asset nature of this? Is it a shared document like Kevin was saying? Is it in a system, Gainsight or Tatango or something else shared? What is the nature of it?
So there are 2 things that I do. I have a shared questions versus answers, etc. sheet with all my customers. These are definitely one-on-one sheets that I have ongoing with them. I have all my notes in there, all the answers, tickets, details, etc. Right, so they can find that information. Second is Gainsight. So Gainsight is where we document everything about all the check-ins that we do, document the customer happiness index score. We can see a trend on that as to what was the score the last time around versus what is it now, what is it that is affecting them, ensure that we enter all the details that we have collected around how to make them happier, and then create sub-adoption plans or create sub-success plans accordingly.
Awesome. Thank you, Tripti. Fantastic insight there. So maybe we could take a step back and focus on and go more in depth on a couple of the questions that were raised that seemed like they got some good response in the chat of ones that everybody wanted to hear. So if you have a thought on how you align the different leaders in your organization and inside your customer's organization to what success means, right? That was one of our first questions. How to do that effectively, right? When success for this department versus this department versus this department, inside or outside of your company, means something different. Would love to hear your thoughts. And if you have your hand currently raised, if you could shift your focus more towards that. So Courtney Greeley, if you could come off of mute and share what you think about how aligning what the definition of success is between internal parties as well as those at your company, your customer.
Yeah, so I mean, just kind of piggybacking on what everyone else said, I think the crux of it all is really working with the customer to define what success looks like. But as a step back, one of the things that I found really helpful to align everyone across the organization in that respect is building out a RACI chart. And that gets all the players within your organization that they understand who's responsible for what, right? And then who's accountable, who gets consulted, who's informed on decisions. Because, and I'm sure I'm not alone here, but having product as a partner is critical, right? Because our customers are asking, they have their success objectives, and we're not going to get there on our own if we can't bring product along to help us, execute on that. And that's, currently that's one of the things that we've had a challenge with, and the RACI was incredibly helpful. And what we did is we actually did a RACI for each stage of the customer journey. So for the sales to CS handover, for onboarding and adoption, and it's just really crystal clear what we're asking from everybody at every stage. And just one other thing, if I could circle back to tools, one of the things that's been really helpful for us in building things out. I know there's a lot of great tools out there. We're working on the budget for that. And in the interim, we have good old trusty Excel. And what we have done is built out a superset of everything that needs to happen to get to success. So that way we can tweak it as we build in lessons learned, and really just have a one-stop shop so that each CSM can kind of pull from that, see what's applicable to their customers, filter it out if not needed, and then they're starting with a pretty good playbook.
Courtney, that's fantastic. Thank you. And thanks for checking Excel. But you can still get it done if you don't have the most expensive or decked out tools. So
I think it's just important to have one place where all that information is stored, whatever that is. And I'm happy to share my RACI that I've done. It was based on a Pulse conference from 2019. So I'm happy to share that with the group.
So if everybody's not familiar with RACI, it stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, and is a hierarchy for saying, in this type of situation, these are the various parties that are responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. as a way to clarify the roles. Courtney, one follow-up question on the RACI, because I've seen this hit and miss in different organizations. Yeah. What were some of the things that were key to getting everybody bought into that RACI? Because I've seen a lot of work put in at various times into this great RACI, and it's all clear, and then nobody pays attention to it. They kind of go back to the way things were. So how have you been able to institutionalize this across your teams for all the different points in your life cycle, and how did you make that happen?
Yeah, I think you're right on the money, right? It's a lot of great ideas die on the vine. So one thing that we do is we do have a weekly meeting with all of the CSMs, and we go through health scores. And for that, we use Confluence. It's pretty easy. We just make sure that we're consistent with how we're defining health and success of the customer. And at those meetings, we do ask for stakeholders from each of our key departments to attend. We address things there. And we always, I think consistency is key. If you keep pointing everybody back to that RACI and you keep, and you hold everyone accountable to it in a strategic way, it can work, but I know exactly what you're talking about. There's times where it hasn't worked in the past, but so it's that consistent reminder of who's responsible at each stage.
Cool. Yeah, I hear you. Accountability rules all. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Courtney. The next question that we had, we've kind of touched on already, and a number of people have said, the question was around, should this be built in conjunction with the customer? And what we've heard so far is that yes, there is a lot of work to do with the customer. Does anyone have a different opinion, a different way, who said, no, the success plan is really kind of more on my side. It's my responsibility to build this and ultimately guide them through it. If you have that point of view, just raise your hand in the chat piece, and would love to hear that side of the equation and what the balance really is for you between the customer's involvement and your involvement. So Manan, Joshi, would you come on?
Yeah, so I can take a stab at it. So there are two things here. In terms of our success plans. One is a tactical success plan that we make, and the other is a strategic success plan we make. And this is specific to what segment the customer is in. Okay, so if it's a highly strategic customer, we do require to have both the plans. And what I mean by tactical success plan is some of the immediate action items that you need to take to find the value to the table. So the sooner we can get to the value, the better for us. And as part of the strategic success plan, we align the executives on both sides and define who will own what metrics on the customer side as well as on our side. Okay, so and both the plans actually go as part of the larger account planning that the customer success team does with the sales reps as well. Okay, so there is a holistic picture that we take for our customers depending on the segment that those are in.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you, Manan. So there's a difference in that case between a tactical plan and a strategic plan, and they have different functions, different uses, different involvement, and different engagements. That's really cool. Thank you so much. Ron, do you have an opinion on what the balance between what you're constructing internally based off of what you know and your expertise and what you're doing in conjunction with the customer?
I do. I think we've all seen this, and this was prevalent at Responses, which was a couple companies ago. A lot of times we would go into customers and have a discussion about what are your success goals and that sort of dialogue, and they're like, I don't know, and they actually have no idea. So part of the things that I think, and that's what customers are expecting from us these days, is a consultative approach in helping them form what their success goals should be. And a lot of that comes from benchmarks and the experience and some other things. So I think, and even most recent company, there's been a lot of companies where we just don't track those types of things. So part of what really is important is getting to the executive level team, making sure that because somewhere in the organization are metrics, right? And success goals, and making sure that you're incorporating those into the overall plan. So not accepting we don't have any success metrics as an option.
That's awesome. And I love the sentiment there, Ron, of, we may ask the customer, what are your goals? And they're looking at us saying, just wrote you a giant check. you're supposed to bring that to the table. And I think that's one key piece that we can always do in conjunction, even seeding a success plan with some of those things based off of all your experience, because they're looking to you to see what you've done with every other customer they ultimately want to get out. The next topic.
The other thing, just
yeah, go ahead. Shoot.
Sorry, just as an adjunct to that, and someone mentioned in the sales to CS handover, but if the sales team is doing their job right, there should be success metrics, and why are they buying in the first place? So you kind of referenced it. We just wrote you a check. So ensuring that those, and we all, I think, can appreciate a lot of times these don't happen, but making sure those metrics come over to the CS team and those are validated is also a key part of it.
Yeah, no, great point. And if we could all have exactly what we wanted at the beginning, we'd be in a whole different world. But that's part of the fun, right? All right, so the next question we had, Ben had, which was, when clients become at risk. So you have this success plan in place. Let's say you've defined it, you brought some ideas to the table, you've worked on it with your customer, but then things go off the rails at some point, right? How are you using the success plan in order to, get back to, in order to engage either others at your company or others at your customer's company? And, what happens for those at-risk customers? Ed, would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, actually, I was just going to comment on the last topic, if I could, Nils.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody participated on Tuesday. Deloitte, the consulting firm, presented the results of a study. They looked at over 300 enterprise buyers of SaaS products, so over 300. And they define enterprise as more than $200 million a year in revenue. And a couple things really stuck out for me. And I think, what Ron said and what you said, Nils, is spot on. Something that stunned me is that according to these buyers, 90% of them wanted customer success to participate before the sale. 90% said, we want to be talking to customer success before the sale, which compared to probably how you're doing it, and the way I've seen it done, 90% is not happening. The other thing I thought was really interesting was of those that where they had CSMs participate prior to the close, only 20% of them were satisfied with what they saw from customer success. So that's broken. The other thing I thought was interesting is that they said 60% of technology providers were not helping them track achievement of the value that they set up. And only about half said that they ever met or exceeded their business outcomes that they had aimed for. So I thought these were just really stunning results. If anybody wants to get copies of that, connect to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to send out their copies. It's just really, my head is still spinning from Tuesday about that. I had no idea it was that bad in the eyes of enterprise customers.
Yeah, Ed, that's fascinating. Oh my goodness, I'm going to hit you up for that too, because that is kind of mind-blowing, right? In some of the worlds that we operate in, and you look at it from a higher level, from a neutral outside third-party point of view, serving the state of the industry, and that's what's there. That's really quite scary. All right, Ed, but I'm going to put you on the spot for the next question though, which is around the customers when they become at risk. So how have you used success plans, or are using in the past, to help with those at-risk situations, right? You got some good plan and it's agreed upon by the customer, but then they drop the ball, or you drop the ball, or something happens and they become in this heightened at-risk state. So how have you used the success plan to actually help in that situation, to align internal, align with your customer?
Yeah, and the ball can be dropped on both sides, right? I mean, you can screw something up and not advance it. The customer can screw something up and not advance it. There can be turnover on both sides, right? That complicates things. There can be lack of execution on the part of the client. I mean, we've run into that. When I was in IntelliSecure, we had our semi-annual business reviews, but during onboarding, we also were tracking that. And you have to keep raising, good project management. What's at risk? What are the consequences? Having red, yellow, green indicators on where you are against their goals, and repeatedly communicating that to the sponsor and to the executive sponsor. So, one of the things that we try to do at IntelliSecure, and I've worked with my clients on the consulting side, is what are the roles and responsibilities, back to the RACI comment, what's the customer success manager doing? What's professional services doing? Your PM that may be involved on these things. So customer success is ensuring the success and satisfaction of that customer throughout the life cycle, right? So they may not be running the project, but they ought to be talking on a frequent basis with the economic buyer and the champion and tracking that, working with the project team and keeping it on track. So it's all about, triggering and raising this as any good project manager would do, managing the change, helping the executive sponsor manage change across the enterprise, because you're changing people's behaviors and people will not adopt unless they change what they do. It's the people side of change. So those are all kinds of tied up in that whole at-risk question. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty easy to tell if your implementation, if your adoption or onboarding is falling apart, if you're tracking it, you should be all over that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ed. This is fantastic. Okay, so going to go to move on to the next question here. We've got about 15 minutes left, so we're tracking on time pretty well. You guys came up with a great list of seed questions to start with. So we'd love to hear about, this was tied to Ron's question around operationalizing success plans. We've heard already a couple different flavors of what's happening. We've got Courtney on the more spreadsheet side and not in the tools. We've got Kevin and others in actual tools and things that are done, right? So what else, what other kinds of assets are you creating? What other kinds of tools are you using to operationalize this? Anything and everything is welcome here. A Google Doc is sufficient in a lot of cases. So I'm just going to call on a couple people here randomly. And if you don't have any success plans in place or you're thinking about it, just tell us what kind of a solution or asset you're thinking of creating. So Sarah Bocino, would you tell us what you think, what's going on? Do you have success plans? Do you use the tool? Do you operationalize them? Where is it at?
Yeah, so we have Gainsight, but I would say we're very probably like using 10% of the platform. We're really, one of our OKRs this year is to advance our usage of Gainsight. So excited to see that people are using that. But we currently have our success plans live in a spreadsheet. And it is joint. We try to do that in the onboarding phase and continue to revisit throughout. We do have something that lives in salesforce.com that comes from pre-sales to success. So it's actually called our marketing orchestration plan. And that captures what Ron mentioned, a lot of those success metrics from the pre-sales. And we carry that into our planning document throughout the relationship. To make it digestible with the customers, we actually use a roadmap PowerPoint slide that we can literally bring up in real time, make sure that we outline the goal or bite-sized chunks of the success plan. We talk about dependencies that might live on achieving those goals within their organization. So understanding that there might be other people or systems or processes that we need to take into consideration to reach that, and then help them baseline, like, okay, if we reach this, what is the desired outcome? So make sure that we're tracking towards that. And I've found that really helps the customer stay focused, and it helps us really facilitate some of the conversations that they might not be able to have otherwise.
Awesome, Sarah. So let me see if I can capture that. It sounds like you've got a lot of levels of different—
3 levels.
3 levels. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me make sure I got it right. You've got a spreadsheet that is jointly owned with the customer, which you're doing from the onboarding or kickoff time to the start point. You've got a pre-sales document that is filled out by your pre-sales team and then handed over to CS. And then you have roadmap, PowerPoint, either slide or slides, which kind of go to another level of detail with all the dependencies, the goals, and kind of more the tactical level. Did I capture those 3 correctly?
That's correct.
Cool.
Yes.
Awesome. Nicely done.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Thanks.
sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Ben, Stuart, what do you think? What is in your world? Do you have success plans in place? What is the physical manifestation of these? How's it work?
So right now, we manage the process beginning with our, of course, our sales team, and we join up. We have tried a few different iterations of that process, and it was mentioned earlier about how CS gets involved and where in the sales process they do. So we have started involving our client success team on the very back end of the deal. We'll have like a kickoff call with the team, and we get the background information that way. From that point, we create a roadmap and then begin a normal cadence of what we call EBRs, or executive business reviews, very common across many different CS teams. And from there, we start functional improvement plans if there are any issues that are outstanding with the client. And that's a shared document that gets prioritized throughout the company internally too.
Cool. So the operationalization really comes from that functional improvement plan. Is that the thing that the team is constantly keeping up to date on the quarterly stuff, as well as the goals and like the objectives and the things that are happening? Is that right?
We mainly use Strike Deck and Salesforce to track our data like across time, but the functional improvement is more of an at-risk.
Okay. Strike Deck and Salesforce. Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing. David Leibowitz, tell us a little bit about how you operationalize success plans. If you have them, what's the state? What does it look like?
Sure. Yeah, great. Thank you. I've used them in two settings. First of all, what was commonly called a joint execution plan was something used commonly when I was at Oracle. It was something that I brought into customer success, originally born out of the sales side of the house. And I think more commonly, it worked best when we were collaborating directly with the customer, although it was very, very typical for us to have an internal parallel document to really enhance on things like what you described for RACI. Certainly, we've evolved that into account planning and tools and tracking mechanisms that become part of what Ben just described, executive business reviews and things that were collaboratively worked with the customer. So very, very common. I think they're living, breathing documents. I think getting the customer's fingerprints on it is absolutely critical. And I think when you get pushback, you get resistance, you could be talking to the wrong person, or you could very much have a customer at risk, and that could require doubling down. Lastly, I've also seen them used in a escalation context. So we had large customers that had various issues when they were having problems with their solution. They escalated to the top levels of the company, and then from that we used it as a springboard to getting into a very tactical plan, bringing in people from product, bringing in people from support, corresponding people from the customer side to ensure that we're just clicking through all the issues, and then obviously working towards a mutually agreed upon outcome.
That's fantastic, David. Thank you for sharing. So it sounds like, I mean, just a handful of people that have spoken just recently, well, actually across the whole call, that the predominant form is in a
Google,
a spreadsheet.
broadcast.
Chris, can you, thank you.
Okay, Google.
Yeah.
Broadcast.
Let me mute you. Cool. The predominant form is from an asset perspective is a document or a spreadsheet or something like that, right? There's a couple people that have the infrastructure built out to take advantage of Salesforce or Gainsight or Tatango or whatever it may be, but the predominant form is that. Is there anybody who does have this dialed in a system perspective, whether it's Gainsight, Tatango, some other CS platform, Salesforce, where everything is kept, tracked, stored, recorded, shared with the customer through that system? If you have that, hit the little hand icon, and David, why don't you tell us what you have in place?
Yeah, sorry if you hear the background noise. There's an Amazon guy outside, and my dog wants to eat him.
No worries.
We use Qualtrics in conjunction with Salesforce. Qualtrics overlaid to Salesforce, and within Salesforce, we use Altify for our strategic account plans, and then we embedded our success plans within our strategic account plans inside of Altify.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, David. Christy, we'd love to hear how you've set this up.
Yep. So similar to what I've done in a few companies, the way that we built out success plans is using Gainsight. While we do encourage free-form success plans for our strategic accounts, just because I do believe that they are unique, and while we can guide them, we should be aligned to allow them to define what their success looks like and free-form it through this digital transformation. We do offer templates based on our modular product. So for example, each one of our solutions has a specific set of use cases that correlates back to it, KPIs that you would track and measure against it. And so each of those is built as a template, a success plan template in Gainsight that you can select based on the products that your customer has purchased. So for example, I have a product called Inspect. If my customer has purchased that, I know that there's a couple different KPIs and success strategies that they would have as a result of that product. They would select that success plan in Gainsight, and it would deploy a series of steps with a rough timeline. So it kind of like is already pre-structured for them. Then the idea is to present that to the customer and kind of work through customizing it based on their infrastructure, their organization, resources, et cetera. And then because Gainsight does allow for shared documents and collaboration through success plans, it's a shared working framework. So we encourage all of our customer success managers, as you're having calls with your customers, to pull that up, to make sure that you're working off of that, and then you're kind of driving your dialogue to make sure that that's constantly being advanced towards. So it's very programmatic in that sense, and it's tied back to the product. It's tied back to providing them with not only the infrastructure, but recommendations on how they should be tracking success themselves. But you got a place to capture their success criteria and other objectives.
Very cool, Chrissy. That's fantastic. I mean, you're taking the best of what we were saying earlier, which is coming to the table with a set of recommendations. And then your team is working with the customer just to adjust those. They're not starting from scratch. They're not rebuilding the wheel unless you're in the highest of high. And that's
correct. Like I said, for some of our large customers, they beat to their own drum, and God bless them. But we've got the infrastructure to let them create that free form. But again, we do try to tie it back to the product specifically. And it's similar to what they spoke about with that sprinkler. So it's just a very structured way for them to manage against that.
Fantastic. Cool. Thank you, Christy. Jaren, you want to come off mute and share with us?
Yeah. Thanks, Niels. Yeah, thanks everybody for sharing these thoughts and ideas, whatever he's doing. Appreciate it. Just wanted to throw in, we use what are called success cycles. Niels is very familiar with success cycles. So on the platform of client success, we have templates that you can create, and we use a combination of these success cycles, which are essentially plans, project plans, their onboarding plans. If you have a customer that's at risk, you can build a template that the CSMs can follow. And so you manage stages, activities, and tasks that are applicable to each one of the life cycle, which sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down, sometimes they're at risk, sometimes they're really happy. And as a part of one of those plans, we base them on segments, so you can assign different success cycles to segments, but we also use, excuse me, what we call success criteria. And so we use a Google Sheet that we gather the success criteria when we're interacting with the customer. It's never a surprise. We send over to them just a very simple little Google, it's actually not a Google Sheet, a Google form, excuse me, to gather the data from them that's a part of our success cycle. And then we have another success cycle that's templated to manage their success criteria. So what the customer tells us, this is what's most important to us, is then built into our success cycle that the CSM follows and manages and tracks the activities and tasks based on what that customer said is most important.
Cool.
So report on those to the success cycles, engage with the customer through that Google Sheet, and of course, regular meetings.
Love it. Thank you, Jaren. All right, guys, if you saw the little headline at the top, 60 seconds, we're going to be back in the main room here. Key things to think about as we jump back in is number one takeaway from today. What did you learn? And number two, what are you willing to put into action? Just a thought, an idea, a further discussion with the team based off of what you heard, whatever it is, just think about that. Jay and Jeff will call on a couple people. Really appreciate the participation and engagement. If we're not connected on LinkedIn already, let's definitely connect. There's only one guy named Nils Vinya in the world of CS, so it's pretty easy to find me. I'll drop my LinkedIn profile in the chat as well. But look forward to seeing you back in the main room, and thanks again for a great session.
You can see that, hopefully, yes, you can. We're just trying to gauge interest next week in terms of Pulse Everywhere and see who might be attending, see if we adjust the call at all. So just take a quick minute to answer that. And then in the meantime, I'm going to try and call on a couple people right here before we end. It seems like I hopped into both rooms and it seems like there was some good conversation going. So maybe from the late stage conversation, one person I'm thinking of is maybe Ron Baumert. Are you here?
I am. Happy Thursday.
Awesome. Ron, do you want to maybe give us one takeaway, one action item? Just, what did you take away that was interesting from the conversation in late stage, which was around kind of success plans?
Yeah, several things. One is, I think, and I forget who said it, but it was I think it was the gentleman from Ring Central. Big companies, small companies are all still wrestling with this, and you're never there, you're never done. And there's never kind of like I've arrived at a successful success plan implementation. So I think that was the first takeaway, is like there's always room for improvement and always iterating. The second takeaway is that systematically it seems like it's kind of pretty sporadic or spread out as far as all the map on who's doing it systematically versus spreadsheets versus some other type of system. So I think that's, again, kind of representative of there's always room for improvement and making it more operationalized. And I think those are my top two takeaways. I'm between gigs right now, so all this is just fodder for my next gig on how to make this happen. But again, it's most organizations don't have it dialed in yet, and I think customers are still very much looking for their CS team to guide them consultatively on what their success should look like. And some have it, I guess that's the other thing, is some customers have more defined understanding what their success looks like, and some don't, and that's where CS comes into play.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Maybe, hey, Dan Maldonado, I see you on my video here. I think you might have been in room one or kind of early stage where they were talking about technology, if I'm right. You want to share maybe your takeaway and kind of what you took out of that conversation?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway, and I'm going from a relatively bigger company to now very small and pretty much the first CS rep. So the biggest thing, and for me, was even if I'm currently using either a few different softwares in my tech stack, as we mature and grow as a CS org, and also just into a bigger company, just to ensure that all the platforms we end up using, if it's multiple or if it's one, they're just interconnected as much as possible, just so that there's just easier to not only work efficiently internally, but also service the customer.
Yeah, that's one thing we hear often in conversations that we've been having is, all of a sudden you've got 5 or 6 different systems and nobody knows what's the truth and where does the actual, what's the source come from? The source data, I think, is the big question. So certainly seems like something tangible to take away. What are you using multiple systems now, Dan, for that process? Or are you still thinking about implementing systems? Kind of where are you along that journey?
We were really using HubSpot primarily from sales to marketing to CS, and really in the process right now of trying to figure out kind of where we go with it. If we stick with them, try to find a CS specific platform, but then on top of that, other things like a customer feedback form, et cetera. I just want to make sure it all ties back into the CRM. So just kind of personally looking into all the options right now.
Awesome. Jim Jones, you want to come off mute? I know you led the session in there, but curious if you had any takeaways just from kind of first breakout room like this, and if there's anything that you brought out of the conversation.
Yeah, a couple of things. There was remarkable convergence on 2 parts of the tech stack. One was a lot of companies using HubSpot and using it for some pretty innovative ways like customer and new CSM onboarding. The second thing, even for smaller companies, 3, 5, 10 employees, Salesforce does appear to be a pretty viable option. I'd always seen it as super heavyweight and really, not until you get to the 50 to 100 employees, but a lot of companies making very effective use out of it. The one other thing that there was general agreement on is your CS look through. Having 12 tools to track customer health and all that kind of stuff, not a winning strategy. So the fewer systems and the more they're integrated, the easier it is to get a 360 point of view on your customers.
Awesome. Appreciate that. And then maybe Nils, I know you were in the late stage talking about success planning. Do you want to come off of mute and maybe give us just a couple of takeaways that you took out of that conversation?
Absolutely, and to add to Jim's point, less is more. always found that to be the case. Yeah, so on the success planning front, we talked there were a lot of questions, right? How do we do this? How do we do it in conjunction with the customer? What are, best practices as far as operationalizing the success plan? What are some of the key things to watch out for? Really incredible questions that everybody has struggled with. And one of the most interesting things to me was that the resounding asset, or the thing that is used predominantly the most, is either a spreadsheet or a doc. Right? That's it. It's a template, it's a structure, it's something to come to the table with, even in a gigantic organization. That's okay. I think over time, as companies progress and as many of the other things get addressed and it's time to operationalize this, then there's room to go to the nth degree with a specific platform design for this. But in the meantime, even if you're in the early stage or the late stage, it just doesn't matter. What's important is that the content of that success plan is mutually agreed upon with the customer, and you can use it as a cornerstone of your work with them. And I thought that was really interesting, just to hear the spectrum of how many people are using it in that kind of way.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, we always like to end these things on time, be respectful of the time you guys spend with us. So appreciate everybody's contribution. Hopefully you enjoyed the breakout kind of early and late stage today. Next week, we're going to try and do a breakout, 2 breakouts again. And we're going to try and do that between the type of customers you serve. So one conversation might lean heavily towards kind of SMB, one might lean more heavily towards enterprise. Based off of the poll results, looks like about 70% of this audience is going to attend Pulse Everywhere for Gainsight. So we might change the time. So we'll keep you guys updated on how we potentially adjust there. And then I know a lot of you are throwing your LinkedIn profiles into the chat. So we're trying to find a creative way as well to try and get kind of everybody's LinkedIn profile and email addresses out so that you guys all can start connecting via those platforms as well. So hopefully we'll have an update on that early next week as we try and find a creative solution rather than just sending everybody 700 plus LinkedIn profiles. We're trying to find a creative way to do that. So be on the lookout for that. But again, appreciate everybody coming today. Hopefully you got some takeaways, and we'll see you guys here again soon.
Great stuff. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all.
Pretty good.
Bye. See you.
Take care.